Hello YouTube, and welcome to this X-Plane video where we're going to be testing out the new Just Flight PA28161 Warrior 2. That's quite the mouthful, isn't it? So as you can see here, we have the Warrior 2, which I've done a little bit of customization to. So I've got my own custom number, ZK007, and I've got the Southern Wings logo here just because they look after my real flight training, and of course the P2B Aviation on the tail there. So today we're going to be flying up to, well, from Invercargill to Queenstown, and that's because in my next video I'm going to be testing out FS Economy, where I've actually picked up a job ferrying some passengers from Queenstown to Mount Cook. But we're not using FS Economy in this particular scenario, so we'll have a look around the plane. The first thing we'll do is get rid of our chocks and tie downs. And then we're going to turn on our master switches and our collision and landing lights. And we're going to check that all our lights are working. So we start over here and we've got our nav lights. Our top tail beacon doesn't seem to be working, which is interesting. Landing light is working. Those lights are working too. And normally in the real pre-flight check you would also test the stall warning, which is down here. But we can't test that, unfortunately, in the simulator. And we'll go around the back to make sure the night nav light is working. So the only one that's not working at the moment seems to be that strobe. I think that's the interior light. Just make sure our breakers are in, which they are, and we'll just check it again. And I'm not too sure why that's not working, but we'll continue on for the sake of this simulation anyway. Whoops. So just turn off all the lights again so we don't drain the battery. And I'm just going to move over here because it's a bit more comfortable, even though I'm not quite as close to the microphone. But you'll have to deal with it. And we'll head back outside, and this is where we do our pre-flight checks. Actually, we're going to head back inside and bring our flaps up a notch. And we're going to make sure our flaps are down, and we would manually just bring the flap right down just to check all the cables are nicely attached and all the bolts are in. We're going to check our ailerons. I don't know why there's a pilot in my plane, but we'll just roll with it. So checking left and right, that's all working. We can see the control yoke is moving with the aileron, and so is the one on the other side. We check our wings, check the leading edge, make sure there's no dents, make sure our wheel spats are all in order. We would normally check the oil here. But we can't actually see the oil on the simulator, unfortunately. Check the air intake's free, nothing in there that's gonna foul the engine air intake. Check the propeller looks all good, make sure it's got nice sharp edges, no dents. Head over to this side. Same again, checking that wing leading edge, checking our spats and tyres. Everything's looking good. Again, test the ailerons here. And if we move up a bit, we should be able to see the control yoke moving, which we can, and the one on the other side as well. Check our flaps, which all seem fine. And check our antennas, they're both there and attached. Moving around to our elevator, which is free and correct, and the trim tab is moving independently. So you can actually see the trim tab here points up and down further than the elevator, which is correct. And just have a look under here just to make sure that that's all moving correctly. And as far as the simulator goes, I'll just check that this baggage door is locked and closed. As far as the simulator goes, that's about all we can do for pre-flight check. In real life we would also do fuel drains, so to make sure the fuel is free. And we would dip our fuel tanks, which we can kind of do by checking our fuels. So we've got 144 pounds in each wing, which is full, which will give us ample flight time to Queenstown. I've already done the fuel calculations ahead of time. So we'll head back into the aircraft and we will shut the door. Make sure that's nice and shut. And another one up here. And now we can we can now begin our startup procedure. So I'm just going to bring up my checklists ahead of time on my other screen. Just give me one moment. So we're going to bring on our masters, our fuel pump, landing light, collision light, and we're not going to need pitot heat. Unlock our primer and prime 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because it's cold here. Bring our throttle open a tad. We'll put the fuel on the left tank because when I fly in real life, we never actually shut the fuel off here. We just leave it on whichever tank we land on. So I always forget to put that on. Mixture full rich. And start the engine. Park brake is engaged. Just triple checking that.
Tower, November, 06, X-ray, Papa.
Not too sure why we're getting radio through when our avionics aren't even on. But we can start the aircraft. Cool. And we can now turn our fuel pump back off. We're not going to need that. And we'll just let that warm up a little bit. So our fuel oil temperature at the moment is pretty much sitting at 0. And while we are waiting for the engine to warm up a little bit, we can get our ATIS, which is, well, we'll bring on our avionics, I guess, first. And the avionics switch took me a while to find in this one because it's not in the same place as it is on the real one, and I've lost it again. Could have sworn it was here. Ah, there it is. Avionics power on, GPS on. We will change this to 1200, which is VFR flight, and put that into standby. And we'll bring our radios and everything else on. Why didn't that turn on? Ah, that'll be why. Okay, so we will tune our radio to the ATIS frequency, which is 127.0, I believe, in Invercargill. 127.0.
Invercargill information uniform. 0 Zulu weather. Wind light and variable. Visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 500 scattered. 2,500 broken. Temperature 5, 2.1. Area QNH1026. Arriving runways 04 right. Departing runways
Okay, so we've got our weather information and runway information, and we've got our QNH, which we have dialed into our altimeter, and the other thing we will do is set up our directional indicator, which should be just shy of 33, which will be quicker to go that way. So that's now set, and now we will head over to the run-up area and do our run-up checks. Just check our oil temperature. So it's still a little bit cool.
06 X-ray, Papa, runway 4 right, clear to land.
Runway 4 right, cleared to land. November 06 X-ray, Papa.
Just turn the radio down a bit. And we've got a warning about spark plug foul up, which is interesting. So we're going to bring the RPM up to 1200. And we'll bring our fuel mix back a little bit. That's looking a lot better. So with our RPM at 1200, we're going to cycle our carb heat. No difference in RPM there. And we're going to check our magnetos, so we're going to bring it back to left magneto, right magneto, and back to both. We're going to bring our throttle up to 1800 RPM.
04 X-ray, Papa.
Check our magnetos again. Magnetos both working. We're checking our alternator is charging. Where is the alternator in this aircraft? Because it should be here. Oh, there it is. Alternator is charging. Gyro pressure is good. Carb heat cycle again. No change in RPM. Drop to idle. And bring it back to 1200. Okay, that's our run-up checks done. So now what we'll do is our pre-takeoff checks, which is trim all the way forwards. That's the wrong button. So we're going to trim all the way forwards. I was wondering if it would be quicker with the mouse. It's not. Does this just cycle forever? It should stop. I think it just cycles forever. Then we're going to trim all the way back. And then we're going to trim forward 6 times. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this one only goes forwards 4 times. So we'll go 2. And we're going to bring our mixture back to full rich. Check that our masters are both on, which they are. Cycle our flaps. Flaps are working fine. Fuel is calculated. Ignition is currently on both. Instruments are set because we did that while we were warming up. Belts and doors are secure. That door is definitely closed and locked. Controls are
November 04 X-ray. Papa. Runway 4 right. Clear to land.
Runway 4 right. Cleared to land. November 04 X-ray. Papa.
really doesn't like the engine idling, does it?
November 0.
Even at 1200.
X-ray. Papa. Gate. Taxi via 04 Romeo Bravo Alpha.
Gate taxi via 0.
So controls are free and
Bravo Alpha.
correct.
06 X-ray. Papa.
And we are now ready to get our taxi clearance. Before I do that, I might program in my GPS. We'll just go direct. To Queenstown. And we'll get rid of the flight yoke just because it tends to get in the way of everything. Although, actually I probably don't need to because I've got a manual autopilot control here if we use the autopilot. Okay, so let's get our clearance.
November 10 X-ray. Papa. Uniform. Cleared IFR to November Zulu Quebec. November as file. Maintain 5000. Squawk 4702.
Cleared IFR to November Zulu Quebec. November as filed. Maintain 5000. Squawk 4702. November 10 X-ray. Papa. Uniform.
November 10 X-ray. Papa. Uniform. Runway 4 right. Taxi via Alpha Alpha 122 Lima. Hold short of runway 4 right.
Runway 4 right. Taxi via Alpha Alpha 122 Lima. Hold short of 4 right. November 10 X-ray. Papa. Uniform.
So we're going to taxi and hold short of the runway. So we'll be heading 040. Should better read that back.
Heading 040. Runway 4 right. Cleared for takeoff. November 10 X-ray. Papa. Uniform.
November 06 X-ray. Papa. Cleared IFR to November Zulu Mike Oscar as filed. Maintain 6000. Squawk 4703.
Cleared IFR to November Zulu Mike Oscar as filed. Maintain 6000. Squawk 4703. November 06 X-ray. Papa.
So just set my heading bug to make it a bit easier to find 040.
6 X-ray. Papa. Runway 4 right. X-ray.
And seeing as we're taking off the grass runway, we are going to bring in
4 right.
2 notches of flaps.
Right. Taxi via Alpha. Alpha 122 Lima. Hold short of 4 right. November 06 X-ray. Papa.
November 04 X-ray. Papa. Fly heading 040. Climb and maintain 3000.
That was a bit weird. Plane decided it was going to come into land while I was on the runway and then disappeared. Must have been an X-plane bug. Now, seeing as this is a short field landing, what I'm going to do is make sure my lights are all ready to go. Landing light is on, bring our fuel pump on, and we are going to full rich. We're going to bring our RPM up, and once that's up, then we're going to release our brakes. And we're going to climb at 80 knots. At 200 feet, we can turn off our landing lights and fuel pump. At 500 feet, we can clear our flaps. And we can bring in our turn. While keeping our climb at 80 knots. So for my first time flying this plane in X-Plane, it's so far been quite enjoyable. Needed a lot more right rudder when I was doing my takeoff roll, but we learn these things. So I'm just going to, we're getting a bit close to the clouds, so I'm just going to keep it at 2000. And our cruise RPM will be 25. So now, once I've got this heading locked in, we're pretty much straight and level. So we're going to fly through those mountains. So I'll give the autopilot a bit of a go and we can enjoy some scenery. Just going to connect my moving map software so I can see where we are. So if we look out to our left, we should be able to see Winton. Somewhere out there in the cloud. I think the cloud's obstructing it. Oh, there it is. That's Winton over there. So just with the way the cloud's been going, I have had to switch to IFR, or instrument flight rules. As you can see, there's a lot of cloud and it goes up a lot higher than I expected. So unfortunately we won't get to see a lot of scenery, but we can see the plane. And I have switched the fuel tanks over. So now running on the right tank. And in about 25 minutes we should be approaching Queenstown Airport. Now's probably a good time to lean out my mixture. That's probably about where I want it for the best fuel economy. And let's test the nav mode of the autopilot. So if I hit nav, we should see this line here line up pretty much straight up with those two arrows. So we can see it's starting to swing. And we can see our line on the GPS. And the autopilot should make a course correction to the right shortly. So if I bring the range down, you can see we're a little bit off course. But this needle is starting to head directly 12 and 6 o'clock. And you can see we're getting closer to the purple line. And normally by now I would have requested IFR clearance. Just rebalancing the plane, making sure the ball's in the middle. That's about right there. But the ATC in X-Plane is known for flying you straight into mountains. And Queenstown is quite a mountainous area, so I will not be using ATC. Okay, so we've got our clearance to approach the runway 32. The only thing I'm not too happy about is ATC wants me to descend to 4,000, which does not look like a good idea in this mountainous terrain. I will descend and maintain 4,000 once I'm clear of these mountains. Okay. So I've tweaked the weather settings a little bit. That's called pilot error, not checking that the weather was okay to land. So we're going to bring in our first notch of flaps. going to check our brakes, undercarriage, mix this fuel rich. The fuel tank is still on the largest tank with the most fuel. Ignition's on both. We're going to turn on our fuel pump and landing light. Turn for our crosswing leg. Crosswind leg. Hatches and harnesses are secure. Bring our power right down because we're going to control our height with our power and our speed with our altitude. Another notch of flaps. And one more notch of flaps. And we want to approach at about 17 knots. And I'd say we're about ready to turn final. So we're quite high because of the mountains, so we need to dump quite a bit of altitude. So we're just using our throttle to do that. And our nose pitch to control our speed. It's a bit awkward to get lined up on this runway because of this mountain. That's not too bad. That's a skinny runway. Still a little bit high. What's our approach speed doing? Oh, right on the money. And we can use Pappy a little bit. So our Pappy's still saying we're a little bit high, now we're about right, so we'll add a little bit more power back. I'm getting a little bit slow as well. Flare, flare. A little bit of a rough touchdown, but not too bad. Let's bring our flaps back up. And we can exit the runway at this taxiway here. I do need to remap my brake button because my brakes, for some reason, are mapped to my handbrake, park brake. So the braking is incredibly intense. So flaps are cleared. We can turn off our fuel pump and landing light now. And we can also lean that mix right out so we don't get spark plug fouling. And I've got no idea where I'm parking. Oh, this seems like as good as any place to park. So, we will now go through our shutdown checklist. So, transponder off. All lights off. Fuel pump is off. Flaps are retracted. Carb heat is off, and now we'll do our bring it up to 1200. Make sure the handbrake's on. Bring it up to 1200. Do a magneto dead check. That worked fine. Bring it back down to almost idle and engine off. Cool, now we can turn off all our avionics. So that's off, that's off. Those two should already be off. And that's off. And we'll flick our avionics master switch off. Batteries off. Mags off. And now we should be able to leave the aircraft. And we'll put our chocks back in. That's a little bit close to that taxiway, but it'll do. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. It's definitely a very nice plane to fly. It's a little bit temperamental here and there, but certainly enjoyed it. It handles very realistically compared to the real thing, unlike the other Piper I've got, which is very skittish. But look at the amazing mountains. I'm trying to get a decent view of the mountains. I don't want to go in there. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.